Welcome to this overview exploring the intersection of design, equity, and the critical importance of language. We begin by examining the foundations of the Equity by Design framework, its core beliefs, and its principles. By the end of this session, you will understand the power of language to see and define problems in the schoolhouse, appreciate the historical evidence that demands our attention on the language that we use, and how we can use community and protocols to attend to our language habits in real time in service of our students. First, let's start with equity by design, the foundation of equity by design, equity as a verb. The equity by design framework is built upon three core beliefs, which guide the intentional work of designing for equity. A central tenet is captured in the belief 4C. Process as product, stating clearly that equity is a verb. It is defined as the process, not merely an endpoint. In equity design work, both the ends and the means matter, meaning we must live the future we want today, rather than modeling the future on the past. This idea is deeply connected to how we speak and communicate, acknowledging that our language is a design act. The principle, speak the future, design the future, highlights the insidious power in language and discourse to influence and control ideas, beliefs, actions, and ultimately, culture. To write a different story for the future, we must commit to using a different language, replacing the current hegemonic discourse. Language is fundamentally our tool to understand problems and imagine new solutions. Two critical design principles guide this action: speak the future, design the future, and cede power. The principle, speak the future, design the future, mandates that we need to actively change the language we use, recognizing its influence on culture. The principle of cede power acknowledges that everyone has power. Ceding power requires wrestling with the dissonance between who we are, who we aspire to be, and how we behave. This reconciliation is uncomfortable and reveals what power must be relinquished. When defining problems, ceding power involves amplifying the voice of the most marginalized and excluded so they can define the problem, which is identified as the first step in ceding power, or love in action. While we are talking about action, everyone in this image did something. The people in this image wrote poetry, started schools, led movements, and ran for office. Their beliefs became action. Before we move on, think about how you can act out your beliefs. Now let's talk about the way we talk. The challenge of shifting language in organizations, particularly schools, is thoroughly detailed in the anchor text, Changing the Discourse in Schools. This text argues that if American schooling is to be transformed, it must eliminate its role in reproducing long-term unequal social arrangements. The authors assert that the current dominant discourse in schools, how people talk about, think about, and plan schoolwork, is a hegemonic cultural discourse. This is labeled Discourse I. Discourse I maintains existing schooling practices and results. It often focuses on singular truths, improving techniques, methods, content, and symptoms, while generally supporting the organizational ability to reproduce itself. For example, Discourse I tends to identify problems like unfinished homework as residing within the student or home conditions, rather than considering that relationships and conditions in the school or classroom might be major contributors. This discourse often involves blaming others for not meeting established standards, as well as administrators and students, which serves to maintain the status quo. The authors propose that serious reform requires a different, more critical discourse called Discourse II, which must precede and guide change. Discourse II conversations are about uncomfortable, unequal, ineffective, and prejudicial conditions and relationships in a school. Discourse II focuses on multiple stories, desired circumstances, learning and school relationships, and causes. The goal of a Discourse II school is transformation, to produce settings where every student develops intellectually to high levels, eliminating the performance gap related to race, class, and gender. Substantive change must begin with a Discourse II dialogue that blames no one and deconstructs what is really going on. This is not new. Our language has always mattered. But for the sake of centering ourselves in the historical context, let's explore James Baldwin's insights on language and why it deserves our attention. To deepen our understanding of why interrogating language is central to dismantling systemic inequality, we turn to James Baldwin's insights on language, race, and the Black writer. Baldwin asserted that writers are obligated to realize they are involved in a language that they must change. For a Black writer in America, being born into the English language means recognizing that the assumptions on which the language operates are the enemy. Baldwin drives this point home with specific examples of how language defines inferiority and shapes perception, such as similes like as black as sin, as black as night, and black-hearted, or the line from Othello where the character throws away a pearl away richer than all his tribe, forcing a black reader to reconsider the meaning of his tribe. This language is not accidental. Baldwin argues that the machinery of this country operates day in and day out, hour by hour, to keep the black people in their place. Furthermore, the American idea of racial progress is itself defined by language. It is measured by how fast black people become white, which Baldwin calls a trick bag because it is an irreducible difficulty. This demonstrates how the language used to define progress or define a problem predetermines the outcome and limits imagination. Interrogating the language we use helps us define problems differently. To think that we can do this alone is naive. That is why working and redesigning our language in the community is essential. The tuning protocol is one tool that can help educators explore the language of our work and its impact on students. The tuning protocol, a tool for interrogation in community. Given the critical nature of language, educators must have tools to interrogate their discourse and practices in the community. The tuning protocol is one such tool, designed to support collaborative reflection and refinement of work. The protocol was initially developed to help educators receive feedback and fine-tune student assessment systems, but it has since been widely adapted for looking at both student and adult work. When focused on adult work, such as a lesson plan or rubric, the protocol allows professionals to look closely at their creations and the assumptions embedded within them. Crucially, the tuning protocol structures dialogue within an ongoing professional learning community, requiring a facilitator to guide the process. After presenting the work and addressing clarifying questions, the core activity is the warm and cool feedback session. Participants share warm feedback, comments on alignment with goals, and cool feedback, possible disconnects, gaps, or problems often framed as reflective questions. The presenter remains silent, listening and taking notes. By engaging in this structured reflection, the tuning protocol enables adults to slow down and use low inference data to monitor the health of their relationships and scrutinize the language and practices, the adult work they are creating, providing a concrete opportunity to operationalize Discourse II by discussing difficult issues in a collaborative, blame-free environment. The tuning protocol enables us to design a new future by allowing us to interrogate and redesign our language in a safe and supportive learning community. As we close out, there are 3 big ideas to keep in mind. 1. Language is design, so speak the future. Language isn't neutral. It's a design system that either upholds or dismantles oppression. At Equity by Design, we hold a simple truth. If we want to design a different future, we must speak a different one. Words shape worlds. They are not passive reflections of reality. They actively produce it. And when the dominant discourse is rooted in whiteness, patriarchy, and hierarchy, then the very language we use to define problems becomes part of the problem. James Baldwin reminded us that language must be wrestled with, disrupted, because its default mode is often violence masquerading as neutrality, as black as sin, black mark. These aren't just phrases, they're cultural design. If we continue to describe inequity with the same words that built it, we can't dismantle it. To speak the future is to design it. And to design it is to choose new words, new frameworks, and new meaning maps that refuse to reproduce the trick bag of whitewashed progress. 2. You can't transform in discourse. 1. Transformation demands we move beyond symptoms to systems. That means shifting the conversation. Most schools stay trapped in Discourse I, the dominant surface-level narrative that focuses on behaviors, checklists, and compliance. It sounds neutral, but it is the language of maintenance, not movement. Discourse I diagnoses incomplete homework as a student problem. Discourse II, in contrast, asks, what is happening in the classroom? What systems, what relationships, what histories are shaping this experience? To design equity, we must move into Discourse II, the space of uncomfortable truth-telling, multiple stories, and shared authorship. This is where we see the bleeding edge and dare to stay proximate. Transformation doesn't start with data dashboards or rubrics. It starts with the stories we allow ourselves to hear and the questions we have the courage to ask. Until we change the discourse, we're just rearranging the furniture in a burning house. 3. Seed power. Stay in community. Equity isn't a destination, it's a way of being, a practice of love in action. Equity work requires us to cede power, not once, not performatively, but daily and structurally. In the equity by design framework, process is product. That means how we design is inseparable from what we create. When we ask, who defines the problem? The answer must come from those at the margins, those historically excluded, silenced, and erased. Ceding power isn't about pity or performance. It's about proximity, repair, and redesign. Tools like the tuning protocol offer structured ways for educators to interrogate their practice with vulnerability and rigor, deconstructing embedded bias without blame. But no tool will work unless we choose to move differently in community. The work is somatic. You will feel it in your body. That tension, that discomfort, that's the work. And love in action means staying in the room when it shows up.